parent of killers. What your story? Most of my family is 99% certain that my cousin murdered his best friend when they were about 12. He's always been a very strange kid, prone to fits of violence. He once tried to beat my other cousin with a canoe for splashing him, and his dad has done time for child molestation. The two of them were alone by a river. My cousin came back and very calmly told his parents that his friend had drowned. The kid had evidence of blunt force trauma to the head, but my cousin said that he had slipped and fell. The DA and medical experts attested that it was not a wound that would have been caused merely by a slip and fall. But my cousin had a great lawyer and got off. I don't hang around that side of the family anymore, for several reasons. Ex-fiancé of 7 years together. He started doing meth without me knowing 5 years and 2 kids in. Tried to get him help when I found out, left him because he refused it. They caught him in his victim's car. He confessed 12 days into his trial. Got life plus 10. Said he wanted to know how it felt to kill someone. I'm raising our 2 kids. They don't know yet. Don't plan on telling them until they're old enough. Kills me that they will have to live with a burden like that. It's massively unfair. They certainly don't deserve it. And neither did the victim or his family. Off the meth, he was the type of person that would help the homeless. Generous, outgoing, excessively intelligent and ambitious. How heavy drugs can change people into monsters. I was 10 or 11. My younger brother and I were visiting our grandparents, hanging out in the hotel. We were told that our mother had passed and our dad was going to jail. It took a while to realize what happened. I got the full story when I was 15. Dad was sleeping. Mom tried to suffocate him with a pillow. He ended up switching it around onto her, resulting in her death. According to newspaper articles, he hid her body in the woods, and according to the police, they would not have found the body unless my dad told the monsieur. He was sentenced to like 15 years in prison. He got out of prison 5 years ago or so. Gets caught up in the pharmaceutical drugs, which led to harder things, and ends up getting some heroin with fentanyl laced in it. And nods. I turned out okay. I have a hard time expressing feelings in my relationship, but my fiancé loves me and works with me. My adopted sister got into a car wreck this weekend while off her medication this weekend. She takes it so that her epilepsy is well managed. We don't know why she didn't take the meds, but she seized a grand mal and struck a mother and her 2 kids on a sidewalk or crosswalk. The 2 kids were crushed to death, and the mother is still in the ICU. My sister is also in the hospital, and we don't know if she will go to prison for the accident. I work at a restaurant, and the father of a killer is one of our regulars. It's a fancy restaurant. Dude is super rich. He and his wife live separate lives, and he goes through a lot of girlfriends, always 20 plus years younger than him. He pays for their condos and plastic surgery. He got one of them a gold necklace that read "Gold Digger" and had her wear it in public. Not a lot of respect for women. That guy. Loud, smarmy older businessman type. Anyway, his son is the guy who killed his girlfriend in LA and drained all her blood. I don't know how the dad feels about it inside, but like, outwardly, no change. Zero change in lifestyle or persona, mannerisms. I'm just an outsider obviously, but you wouldn't even know it happened. When it happened, my great aunt was dating this guy, and this guy really wanted to have sex with her. It was 1930s Italy in a remote town. Sex before marriage, even to a fiancé, basically made you an instant town slut. Anyway, he promised to marry her if they did, and she said yes. Well, a few days later she sees him flirting with another woman. So she goes home, grabs her father's gun and kills him in the streets after luring him in. She only got a few years in prison and moved to Toronto a year later. Happily married with 5 kids. Wife's grandma had 3 sons. One died and one's been in prison for 30 years for murder. She's still leaving everything to him in the will. He's a better person than the other surviving. brother. Edit. Deceased son would be my father-in-law. One in prison when in at 20 BC during a drug binge got in a fight with a friend and killed him and will tell you he regrets it every day of his life. The third Poss brother, aka the man with no plan, is an emotionally and physically abusive asshole who married his brother's widow, crashed her phone more than once with tracking apps, forced her to tattoo over his brother's name, banned her of speaking about him, beat his son at least once, put hands on the mother-in-law a few times, threatened suicide a couple times to get her to stay. Obligatory, not me or my kids but a neighbor whose son murdered his parents 5 houses down from me. I was young at the time, but it's one of the most gruesome things I've been around. Lived next door to an older couple with a son who was roughly mid-20s. But I guess he'd just lost his marbles in an argument, left the house, took the car and was gone for a few days. He came back and stabbed his dad over 30 times, and the only reason he didn't kill his mother was she was at the store. And #X200B. They were the sweetest old folks. My wife's uncle is a mass murderer. We were taking a trip to visit her family, and while driving up she asked if we could see her uncle. I said of course, thinking nothing of it. She told me he's in jail. And when I asked what for, I was shocked to learn who her uncle was. He has a different last name than her. And it was crazy meeting him, monsieur. We arrived at this giant prison complex and went to a small building which housed notorious inmates. We all talked for an hour in this big room that looked like a school cafeteria. And he was actually a pretty nice guy. He now calls me on my birthday. Edit. Since people seem interested, here's another funny tidbit. Prisoners don't eat much fresh food. So at the prison you can buy inmates food from vending machines in the visiting room. Monsieur, he ate 4 salads and drank 2 Diet Cokes. He dominated those salads. I lived 2 houses away from a murder. It was 2006 and my neighbor emigrated from Iraq. He had a wife and 4 children. The youngest child died of influenza. The following months I watched this man go to the LDS church for help, where they basically said to fuck off. His wife went off the deep end. The day before Halloween she stabbed her 3 children to death, slit her wrists, and set the house on fire while her husband was at work. He buried his children in a cardboard box, then committed suicide. My adoptive father grew up in BC, was heavily involved in gangs and drugs. I never knew much about him as a person really. He would occasionally tell me stories from the good old days, but they were very sugar-coated. He got back into drugs when I was a teenager. One day he came home all fucked up on heroin and told me in great detail about this guy he killed when he was younger and in the gang scene. I was horrified. My mom came home one day super drunk. She had recently got divorced for the 4th time and she was pissed about it. I had a friend sleeping at my house that night. I think it was 3 a.m. when I heard a scream coming from my friend downstairs. I ran down the stairs as fast as I could into the living room. Monsieur, at first I didn't know where she was, but when I looked into the kitchen I saw my mom hold a knife with blood on. I saw my friend lay dead on the kitchen floor with blood everywhere. My mom had stabbed her in the stomach about 21 times and she died. It still traumatizes me 12 years later. My mom got lifetime and I haven't spoke to her since that night. Gonna be buried. But whatever. When I was 8 years old, my family life wasn't great. My mom and dad were always screaming at each other. And it was obviously not gonna end well. I thought a divorce was coming. But what actually happened was so much worse. Turns out my mom was cheating on my dad. And her new boyfriend had a plan for him and my mom to kill my dad. They end up going through with it. And they poisoned him monsieur after he died. My mom went in for questioning. And felt guilty. She confessed to all of it. And her boyfriend got life in prison. Completely shattered my family apart. By far the worst few weeks of my life. Edit. To clarify, I still am messed up because of this today. When I meant a few weeks, I meant it was the worst part of the whole thing. Something like that doesn't blow over in a few weeks. But the friend who did it isn't on Reddit, so a very large friend of mine is basically a violence magnet for some reason. Like a perfectly random guy in a bar stabbed him with a box cutter once. No explanation, just a box cutter, and then he got clobbered. A while back, two guys in his neighborhood broke into his house during the day. His guest was looking for stuff to sell for drugs, and his dog was barking at them before he even got into the room they were in. One of them shot at his dog and missed as he rounded the corner, and he basically beat one to death. And the other ran off with broken bones. He was okay and the dog was fine. No charges were filed, and while he was a little shaken by it at the time, he didn't really feel bad about it ever. He was protecting his dog's life, so no real guilt. But he's not the sort of guy to internalize that sort of thing.